Welcome to Quick Photography Workshops with me, Lucy Cooper. These are very quick workshops covering some photography fundamentals. Most of the images I use are my own, and what I will share with you about some of the techniques we cover are from my own experience and practice. There are no end of resources online to pad out your knowledge and understanding, and I'll share some of those with you at the end of this workshop. In this short video, we'll talk about some basic compositional techniques that can take images from zero to hero. These are rule of thirds, leading lines, and fill the frame. There will be another video on some other compositional tips and tricks, such as negative space, pairs, shape, and symmetry. If you haven't watched my video about light and focus, then I recommend you watch that alongside this video. Together they should start to build your foundational knowledge of photography. As I mentioned earlier on, I have tried to use as many of my own images in this presentation as can, but some are from online resources. First of all, a tiny bit about me. My name is Lucy Cooper. I'm not in this image, but my two kids are. That's Flo on the left and Isla on the right. I'm a researcher and full-time management planner, and whilst I love my job, I do harbour dreams of being a full-time photographer. I'm entirely self-taught and see every opportunity to photograph as an opportunity to practice, and I carry my camera with me most days of the week. Before we leap into some compositional techniques, I think it's really important to say that photography is highly subjective. In photography competitions, as in real life, judges can have wildly different views on the merits of an image, and to listen to them sometimes you wonder if they're talking about the same image. And I think the image that's coming up on the next slide is illustrative of the highly subjective nature of photography. So what better way to think about the subjectivity of art than this image? This is Peter Perrier's The Baby from 2003. It is part of a highly prestigious collection in Auckland. To some, this image could look like a really bad shot taken at a family gathering. But to others, myself included, this is a work of mysterious genius. I don't think I can really articulate why I like this image so much, but I do, and I can spend ages looking at it. The baby's head has taken on some really weird proportions as the baby leans forward towards the lens. It's almost as if the baby's entirely lost its chin. The flashbulb accentuates these odd proportions, and there's a starkness to the image, but also to me it resonates of family gatherings, the joy of having a baby in the house, late nights and whānau. It's also nicely obeys the rule of thirds, which we'll come on to next. So the rule of thirds. First of all, I just want to cover off what composition is really. So today we're going to be looking at some compositional techniques. So when a photo looks good to you, there may actually be a reason behind it. And once you're kind of given a clue as to what the things are that you're meant to be looking for, it really is as if a mystery has been unveiled. It's quite fascinating. And the reason is really composition and some of the techniques that go towards that. Simply put, composition is the visual elements of a photograph, such as the placement of objects, the subjects that you choose, focal points, and the layout of the overall photograph. And good composition is pleasing to the eye. It looks balanced. And herein lies the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is applied to a photo in terms of dissection. You take two vertical lines and two horizontal lines and divide your photo up into 9 equal squares, like this image here. And some cameras and some devices enable you to divide your viewfinder in that way, so you can start to compose from the moment you put the camera to your eye. The goal in using the rule of thirds is to place your subject, or the focal point, along or near these lines, and particularly where they meet or dissect. And I've shown you where those points are with the round dots. The human eye naturally gravitates towards these intersection or meeting points when an image is split or divided into thirds. So what we're trying to do when we're using the rule of thirds to help us compose an image is to frame your subject so that it or they are positioned on the intersection of any two or more lines. Let's have a look at some examples. Now this is a pretty picture of an egg and it's slap bang in the middle of the frame. It's okay. If you were really into eggs, you might think, yep, this is an all right image of an egg. But ask yourself, what if we move our frame or the egg and reposition the egg so that it is on or near where lines meet or intersect? And I should say that this isn't one of my images, but it is a stupendous picture of an egg. So in this image, the egg is now positioned to the left third of the frame. And better still, it's resting right on one of those points where our lines, our grid, intersects or meets. It makes for a better composition and a more arresting image, especially if you like eggs. Again, this is not my image, but it's a great one for demonstrating the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds also says that the horizon should be 2/3 from the top of the frame or 2/3 from the bottom. And here we have the horizon 2/3 from the bottom of the frame. And you can see that when I put the dot there, that little girl is on those beautiful intersection points, and you've got the horizon exactly 2/3 from the bottom of the frame. And there's another intersection point there where her feet are joining, are at that bottom left-hand segment. So just to demonstrate that a bit more. This is an image that I took when Meghan and Harry came to visit Wellington. I think that must have been 2018. I had a very long lens, so I was a long way away from everything on that day, but I was really intrigued by the interaction of the camera, of the cameraman and the crowd. And what I tried to do, and I think I probably did this deliberately, was try and get him in that right hand part of the frame. And you can see there that I have kind of managed to hit the rule of thirds in that bottom right hand segment of the rule of thirds grid. And there's another one. So I haven't completely obeyed it, but what I have tried to do is put the subject. I really like the fact that that guy was sitting over there onto the right hand side of the image. The direction that his camera is pointing kind of draws your eye to those interesting faces on the left hand side of the image. So the jury's out whether I've managed it, but I still like the image all the same. Again, this isn't one of my images, but it just demonstrates that here we've got the horizon in the bottom third of the image, and you've got the sky kind of dominating above, and that kind of makes sense because the sky is absolutely epic in this image, but equally the hills are pretty awesome as well, but you've got just enough of those to give you the sense of scale and majesty of that sky. And here again, sorry, not one of my images again, but this is a beautiful portrait. I think that's his hair wrapped around his head, and you've got the rule of thirds being obeyed. He's completely over on that left-hand segment of the image, and you've got some intersecting points there. And his eye also is really nicely centered in that middle right-hand segment of the rule of thirds. This is a really great short and sweet video on the rule of thirds if you'd like a bit more info and hear another voice other than mine talking you through that rule. And really, I think what's great about understanding rules is once you know them and you understand them and you can see them, you can start to break them. So not every fabulous image that you find and see and fall in love with will obey the rule of thirds, but it can be a really good way of starting to organise your eye when you approach a scene, and it can really help you find the gold in scenes that in the first instance might not seem that fascinating. And I think it's a really useful rule to practice so that you can learn how to break it. Now we're going to learn a little bit about another compositional technique, and that's leading lines. Leading lines refers to a technique of composition where the viewer of your photo's attention is drawn to lines that lead to the main subject of the image. A leading line paves an easy path for the eye to follow through different elements of a photograph. A viewer's eyes are naturally drawn along leading lines, along vertical lines, parallel lines, diagonal lines, and even strong horizontal lines. And just thinking now, you really can use all these compositional techniques I'm talking about in this video and in the other composition video together, or some together, or you can just focus on one. This image in this slide is taken in Southwold, which is a stunning little seaside town on the east coast of England, where I got married actually. And these beach huts are absolutely synonymous with Southwold, and I got up really early one morning to capture this. I just love all these lines. You've got these diagonal lines of the roofs, of the panelling on the boat sheds or the beach huts. And you've got the parallel, the diagonal lines of the steps and of the marking on the pavement. I mean, it's all going on. So this is leading lines. Here's another personal example of where I've used leading lines, and just bragging rights here, I did win a bronze award in the NZIPP photography competition this year, so I'm pretty proud of this image. In fact, I've got lines going on everywhere in this. This is a group of coasterers at a place in Dorset called Dancing Ledge, which I took last year. Coastering is a really popular sport in the UK, and it's a combination of rock climbing, swimming and optional cliff jumping. I certainly saw a lot of people jumping, as you can see. I captured one of them going in there. And as you've probably guessed from the term, this sport, which got its start in Wales, takes place on a coastline. And you can see where I have also tried to use the rule of thirds. So really think, when you're thinking about leading lines and the rule of thirds in this image, you've got these beautiful kind of diagonal lines in the bottom third of the image, which then takes you up to the top third of the image. You've got that guy leaping off in that top third, and he's drawing your eye over to the right-hand side of the image. And everybody is doing something, but they all seem mysteriously connected. And indeed they were when the whole scene played out. They're actually on a circuit. So you jump in from that top third, you get into the sea, and then you're organised to come out in that bottom third. So it was a really incredible event to witness. Another photo from my holidays, and this time this is Southwold again, on the other side of Southwold from the beach hut image I showed you earlier on. This time people and what they're doing are adding to the leading lines and pathways in this image. Train tracks, roads, rivers, buildings, fences, walls, they can all be used to create leading lines. And one of the important things your students need to ask themselves when applying leading lines is, where do I want the viewer's attention to be drawn to? I'd really encourage your students to just experiment with finding those leading lines. It can be looking along a classroom building. It can be looking down a street with, and aligning yourself with the hedge on a street or a fence. Just look for them. Once you start looking at leading lines and once you start finding the rule of thirds, once you'll see it everywhere, and it can become a really useful part of your practice to just kind of train your eye to look for those opportunities. And again, I've just shown you the rule of thirds where that kind of applies as well. We've got most of the action going on in that left hand and bottom third of the intersects, and then the sky occupying the right hand side of the image. And I just like the way that everybody's hands are and the movement, particularly on the left hand side of the image, are kind of drawing your eye up and down the image and across. Next, fill the frame, and this is another one of my favourite compositional tools. When we talk about the frame in this context, we're talking about what's in your photo, what you can see through your viewfinder or screen. The edge of the photograph is the edge of the frame, and within it is the part of the scene you choose to capture. So what does it mean to fill the frame? Well, when you fill the frame with your subject, you fill the photograph with the subject. So it's all about the subject. So you are making a clear statement of what is most important in the photo. As it takes up most, if not all, of the image, the viewer is immediately drawn to your subject. When you're new to photography, we tend not to fill the frame with the subject. You kind of stand back, and I think that's there's all sorts of reasons for why that might be. You might not know to move forward, but sometimes there can be a bit of nervousness around approaching a subject more closely, particularly if it's a person. So instead we include too much background, foreground and other people and objects. It can be distracting, and it doesn't immediately draw the viewer to the focal point of the photo, because it makes the viewer's eye dance around a busy image. As a result, an image can lose impact if it's too busy for the subject. So, there's a lot going on with this fill the frame concept, but it is useful if you really want to experiment with a subject, getting right up close, and that can be somebody's face, it can be a plant pot, it can be anything. Let's have a look. Here's some examples. So this was taken again in Dorset. I spent a lot of time in Dorset in 2019. These beautiful hot houses at this incredible stately home, and this was some chili. So first of all, I was really captured by the structure of these plants and the colour. I loved the light that was coming in through the windows and falling on that beautiful brick wall at the back. So I started to take images of these chilies. I was also really envious because I can never grow chilies that look like this. But then I started to move right in, and I was really fascinated by the just the exquisiteness of these chilies. So I moved right in and started to fill the frame. And so I didn't crop. I actually moved in. You can crop to fill the frame, so you can take a photo from way back and crop so that your frame is then smaller, or it takes up a smaller part of the image that you originally took. But depending on the quality of your camera or the quality of the image that you've taken, you might start to lose some of that, some of the quality in the image. So I would really encourage your students to move their bodies and move their feet and get closer to their subject if they want to fill the frame. And here's the rule of thirds that we were talking about. And so we've got some intersecting lines. We've got them all going on here. So that's just to demonstrate that you can think about two things at once. You can think about filling the frame, and you can think about the rule of thirds. Here's another example of me filling the frame. This is my daughter. This time this image was taken in Spain, in San Sebastian, which is an incredible town on the west coast of Spain. And this was taken on the beach. This is natural light. Because of the buildings that surround the beach, there was an amazing amount of reflection of the sunlight, and it cast this incredible light on my daughter's face. And I was just really drawn to her face and that steely look in her eye. So I decided to fill the frame. And again, I didn't crop the image. I didn't take the image far away and then choose to crop in post-production. I moved closer to my daughter and got right in her face. She doesn't like me doing that. And this is my other daughter, and again I chose to move right in to flow to take this image. I loved that this is a really windy day. This was taken in Dorset on a place called Portland Bill, and it was blowing an absolute hoolie. Her hair was going. My daughter Flo is quite a good poser, and I really zoomed in. It was quite difficult to focus. I wanted the focus to be on her face and not on the hair that was blowing in front of her face. So again, it's about taking time. If you've got a subject that's a human being or an animal that wants to walk away and move or wriggle, then you might need to coax and cajole. But Flo was only too happy to have a photo taken, and I filled the frame with her face. And here's another example of a sunflower, and this again was at the stately home I mentioned earlier on. They had this incredible maze, and the sunflowers were out in full bloom in the maze. They had them all tucked in around the maze. And I wanted to fill the frame because I was really fascinated by the structure and the detail in these incredible sunflowers. So how do we fill the frame? Well, we can get closer to our subject or wait until the subject comes closer to you. That sometimes happens in nature photography. If you happen to have a zoom function on your lens or a zoom lens, then you can zoom in. Or you can crop closer in post-production in the editing. But again, as I mentioned, depending on the quality of your camera or the quality of the settings that you've got on your camera to take the image, you might lose some of that detail, and you might lose the structure of the image as you crop. You don't have to stuff the frame full of your subject, as I think as we've seen in some of these images, though I do love to do that. But try it out and experiment. Don't be afraid to move your body to get that shot and take the shot far away, then move in to take a closer look, and just experiment with all those distances and techniques. So here are some resources. This is just a few, and I really do encourage you and your students to type in photography terms into Google. You will come up with no end of resources, journals, articles, videos. There is just no end of some of the free to access information that you can get hold of. But I do think that one of the greatest resources that you have is your patience and your willingness to try out new things and your willingness to fail. I think, students might get a bit disheartened if they try out some of these techniques and they don't work. Kids do tend to get quite distracted quite easily, and that can show up in their images of just, random stuff. But it is something, if you practice, you can start to see the sense of some of these techniques, and you can start to see how to break them, and in order to get even more creative. So that was me. Thank you so much. This is my daughter Flo and Cat Truffle being aliens in lockdown. I'm Lucy Cooper. It's been a pleasure to bring you this first in 2 videos about compositional techniques. This is my email and telephone number, and I hope you and your students have an enormous amount of fun trying out some of these and other techniques. Thank you so much.